Open to the floor.
I feel that although the presentations you all had very different perspectives, there was a commonality amongst all of them, which is about reclaiming space back for whether it's children or for adults, and how transforming it with landscape architecture and good design can make a massive difference to communities, can bring whether it's business communities with parklets, local communities together with the wonderful thing you're doing, or children, providing them the opportunity to have the imagination to play without it being prescriptive. So these are all really important and vital factors to making our cities livable. And bearing in mind that I think it's, what is it, 90% of us in something like 90% of us in the UK now live in the urban environment. So it is really vital. So does anyone have any questions? Simon?
Yeah, thank you. I'm really interested in seeing how we can kind of encourage kids to play. So I was really interested in the presentation about the work you've been doing. I was kind of wondering really if there's any research sort of suggesting if we kind of engage kids, get them out into sort of these play spaces or more natural play spaces, that they will, over their lives, actually encourage others or sort of themselves spend more time as they grow older and protect those spaces. I was kind of wondering from a, because I think that's really important in how we protect green spaces going forward anyway. And I was kind of interested.
I think there is an increasing body of evidence which says that children who are outside, it's a bit like the old thing, if you learn to ride a bicycle as a child, you will ride a bicycle as an adult. And it's the same principle really. If you're going to be outdoors and playing outdoors as a child, you're much more likely to carry on being outdoors as an adult. I think there's quite a lot of information. There's quite a lot of studies have been done looking at the difference between children how differently children play in play areas which are the old-fashioned equipment-focused ones, and play spaces which are more landscape-led in terms of their design. And it's quite interesting, actually. Is that me? It's you. It's quite interesting. If you ask children, and I've done this myself, what would you like in your play area and what do you enjoy playing on? They all go, we want a zit war. I've got to have a zit war. But if you actually watch them, what they do in the play area, and how long they spend in the zit war will engage them for 5 minutes. But the things that engage them are not the things that they are actually so consciously aware of. So if you put, for instance, sand and water into play area, some of them will say that that's what they prefer, but most of them, in terms of the dwell time, if you like, it's vastly increased with using those sorts of natural elements in a more natural landscape setting than you get in a conventional play area. The other advantage is that if you create a nice space, which it feels more like a landscape rather than full of product, the adults are more likely to stay as well. They're going to want to stay longer. So adults who are not looking at the watch going, come on, we've got to go home now all the time, that's got to be a good thing as well.
What was KFC for again?
Sorry.
I've forgotten.
Pit, fence, carpet. And the really important thing to remember is that the term was invented by Helen Woolley, who's a very, very good landscape lecturer in the landscape school at Sheffield Uni. And we have to give her credit because it's passed into play design language as being the thing which we don't want.
Hi, I think it's an excellent idea, and I did a lot of playing in parks and open spaces. But a lot of parents, there is this, terror, fear of letting their child go anywhere out of their sight, and that's why the fence is quite a safe space. Is there any way that how have you had to tackle that?
Well,
just from like a security safety point of view.
Well, the first thing is that there are always different ways of providing boundaries. and good landscape architects who have an understanding of how children play should be able to find ways around it. Most people in the play industry now, even on the manufacturing side, and they actually like making money out of selling us fences, most of them now accept that in lots of situations, fencing is not required. So if you've got a play area next to a main road, it would be silly not to have a boundary, but the boundary doesn't necessarily have to be a fence. There are loads of situations where you don't need fences at all and where it's just, frankly, an enormous waste of money. I mean, most traditional play areas, there's more money spent on the fencing and on the surfacing than there is on the play equipment, and that's just daft. That's just daft. Ridiculous.
Yeah, another question, really about parklets. You go to San Francisco, they're everywhere. Here, we don't really see so many of them. And my understanding in San Francisco is some are municipality-based, some are paid for by the local coffee shop or the bike shop or whatever it seems to sort of be in front of. Why don't we have so many in the UK? What's sort of kind of holding us back? Because they are great spaces, the ones I've witnessed. So I was kind of wondering, why we don't see more of them, because it is a great thing to see people congregate and for nature to actually come back into our streets.
I think we talked about this a bit earlier, that people are scared of the unknown. People don't really understand the benefits of these places. So initially, when we were doing the consultation on this Spitz Park, there was probably a lot more trepidation and anxiety over it than when it was installed, and people actually realised there isn't antisocial behaviour going on and it's not attracting vandalism. And so I think that maybe it's a cultural thing partly, and I think by having more of them installed, we're helping that. But I think our planning system's very complicated, and it hasn't caught up enough yet with allowing these kinds of temporary installations to happen quickly. I don't know if you guys agree, but so we've met on this one with Camden Council lots of times, and they love it and they want to do more of it, but there's so many hoops to go through their end, so much bureaucracy in terms of, well, what kind of planning application is it? If we make it permanent, what do highways say about that? So they've got to catch up with it. And then we were speaking as well that in Europe that it's a lot easier as well as maybe as in America, that the local authorities, that you give money to the local authorities to enable it to happen. So we need some schemes like that maybe to help. Because local authorities don't have any money, they're scared of the cost of them. So if we can engage communities and business improvement districts to take these things on, and local businesses, then there won't be that fear from the local authority that they might have to fund it and maintain it and do it.
I think you've touched on the cultural thing that we have here as well, is that for some reason in the UK, congregation and dwelling in outdoor space isn't so, it's the norm in places like France or Italy, whereas here, maybe it's the weather, it's where we originally came from, but there's a big leap of faith for a lot of local businesses. Immediately it's going to impact them for the better. But they had to see it in place, didn't they? Otherwise you were talking to deaf ears. So this is something that we propose, is dropping in and then pulling out, and so people can feel the difference once it's gone. Give it to them, take it away, then they can have it back permanently. But it's an ongoing game of persuasion and reassurance that these spaces actually happen, and of course there should be more of them.
Hi, my name is Antonia Kayat. I'm an architect. I did a little study a while back into spare car parking capacity in London on street parking, and came to the conclusion that you could lose about 50% of on-street parking in outer London without affecting people's ability to park their car, and about 40% in inner London. But that was based on very sort of rough assumptions and figures. And it seems to me that one of the biggest problems we face is that there's always a battle of how we use our space on roads, and everything's given over to the car. Have you done much research into car parking capacity and how much space we could actually lose without sort of impacting on the current situation? And then obviously with reducing or declining car ownership, which is actually happening, maybe over time we then would add in terms of green spaces.
Well, I haven't personally, but Arup have, I know. And well, doesn't Sadiq Khan want a car-free London by 2040, is it?
Really?
So it's going to massively change how we use our streets. So yes, we are going to have so much room. People aren't going to be driving into London. Car parking spaces are going to be a thing of the past. And therefore we need to be doing these schemes now to raise awareness of how much more the street can do for us in terms of our well-being and our recreation and everything like that. So yeah, I haven't got the figures, but yes, there's huge studies being done on how to transform London and the country streets.
I think picking up from what you were saying before as well about is the maintenance and the concern around the longevity of this for the councils without the cash is what you touched on about getting communities involved and that potential. It's a lot, it's easy to say, the community can maintain it, but there is real potential there if you could get a strong enough group. And then, of course, what we've seen is the ownership then is the sense of ownership can then expand the idea of what the role of the community in the public realm is, as a contrast to an expectation perhaps that these things could have been done beyond our control. So I think that's really, really interesting, and also taking it as a study case as part of its, as part of the project design in its temporary nature. I think, building that in, I think it's really, really interesting.
I think it's also interesting, if you got rid of all cars, you could have these sort of huge play streets, like suddenly Regent Street becomes a play street, the embankment becomes a play street. It's with suddenly the idea of our public realm, what we think is ours and our sort of entitlement to that, whatever future you imagine, that either it's all electric and the only, it's only goods vehicles, the economy driving stuff, delivering stuff is sort of going on, or it's all drones or whatever it is. It does feel like that our entire kind of conception about what is public space and what we can do with it and how is just going to get very, very exciting. So.
Yeah, and I think, that's where these ideas of show and tell, rather than volumes of documentation which only a certain amount of the population read, these small projects which are intermediate perhaps before the permanent development can demonstrate the impact without causing too much kind of friction between those who are quite scared of change. And I'm assuming a lot of you here are pro kind of pedestrianisation, as we're all at ecobuild. And the research that the folks at Arup and bigger organisations are doing, and smaller, we're all kind of building our own resources, will kind of push this forward, but it won't be overnight, because we have to be realistic. We have to understand that we've got to work out the logistics and the realism of deliveries. We're not going to quickly just have these flying drones which are being pushed forward by Amazon and the like. So I think these smaller spaces will have a much bigger impact over time than the much larger projects that the Garden Bridge, where this whole conversation came from. Let's look at how we invest in the smaller spaces, and they permeate out through amazing engagement projects, getting people playing, and getting more human-friendly streets. So I think.
Thank you all to all our speakers, and I think one thing I would like to sign off as someone who's working with small green spaces is that they always need local support. So if one is happening in your neighbourhood, support it, because there are so many forces lined up making it difficult, whether it's planning or nervous businesses. So give these people support. They deserve it, we deserve it, and they are making massively important and positive changes to our existence in the city. Thank you very much for coming.
Thank you.